Today I'm going to show you how to make this flower that was in the middle of the bow on the lantern that I showed you in the introduction. This bow is quick and easy to make, and it's beautiful, and it adds a nice accent to any of your projects. Let's get started. These are the supplies you are going to need. I just have a scrap piece of fabric here that I like the texture of, and I'm using 3 different colors of PowderPuff Chalking Ink, and they are Biscotti, Mango Mai Tai, Mocha Mama, and Lemonade, and we'll get to those in a minute. I also got some of this new Inca Gold Metallic Rub. Love this stuff. I'm going to show you how to use it. A doily that is the size of the flower I want to use, and I am starting with these 2 pattern papers from Quick Quotes. This is part of their new line, Back to Basics. I love these papers because the one side has a pattern, you know, and the other side is a different pattern, but it makes it great for the projects where you're going to see both sides of the paper. So to get started, we are going to take this doily, which really is not even going to end up in our project, but it's the size of the flower I wanted, and that was good enough for me. And all I did was lay the doily down on the pattern paper, took a pencil, and I just started roughly tracing around the doily. I'm not being really careful here because it is not going to matter when we're all done how careful I was, because this paper gets all crinkled on the edges. I just want a little bit of a scalloped look. And I'm making my scallops slightly larger than what's on the doily paper so that they'll stand out. I'm going to do that on this piece of paper. I am going to trace it on the fabric, and I'm also going to trace it onto this. And I will be back when I have all of those traced and ready to go. Okay, so I got all of my flower shapes cut out. As you can see, I wasn't real careful with where I cut. There's some pencil marks there, but it's really not going to matter. I'm going to start with my bottom layer of my flower, which was the polka dot paper, and I'm going to set these other ones off to the side. I'm going to use the Mocha Mama, and one of the best things, and I've said this before about these inks, are the fact that you can just go directly around the paper with them. You don't need any other tools to apply them. I'm going kind of thick with this because I'm going to be blending it in here in a minute. You're going to see what I mean. So nothing careful here, just do it real quick. And I am even going to put a little on the back side because when those flowers curl up on the edges, I don't want it to be just plain, you know, that lighter white color. So I have it on both sides. And what I'm going to do now is one of my favorite things to do is I'm just going to take a spray bottle of water and I'm going to spray the flower. Let me put the paper towel down first so I don't make a mess out of my mat. And just a real light layer of spray. And with that, I'm just going to kind of crinkle up the flower a little bit. And I'm going to go around the edges. And the more you work around the flower, the more it's going to start working and bending a little bit without tearing. It becomes a little more flexible. And on the bottom layer, I'm not going to do a whole lot, but I am going to curl the edges up a little bit on the flower and crinkle it a little bit so it's not just laying flat. I want to give it a little texture. And I'll take some of the bigger petals and curl them up under. Now you can either let this dry on its own, or you can take a heat tool to dry it. I'm not a very patient person, so I'm going to take a heat tool. I will be right back. What I like is once it's been wet and it dries, the paper kind of holds this form, so it's a little more stiff and it has a little more texture to it. It's not flat anymore. And what I'm going to do is, you can see some of the ink kind of blended in and lightened up a little bit there on the edges. I'm going to take Biscotti, my other favorite color, and I'm going to go over it lightly and get some of those spots where the folds are and crinkled, just to give it a little more of an old worn look. and it's that simple. And this layer is done. I'm going to set that to the side. The next layer I'm going to work on is the fabric one. And this, I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the first one, is I'm going to take the Mocha Mama and I'm going to go around all the edges. And this is a little harder because the paper is not stiff. But what I'm really wanting to do is to just get the color on there. So as you can see, it's all kind of going on in spots, you know, where my finger's under there, it's a little leaving thick spots. Don't worry about that because we're going to wet this down too and scrunch it together. And when this fabric gets wet, that ink in there is going to even out and spread out a little bit. And I'm going to go right in the middle of this. And I'm even purposely crinkling it up a little bit to get some darker spots on there. So I have this ready. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to spray it with water, and you can already see the color starting to spread in there. And I'm going to crunch it up around the edges. A little in the middle. But the edges are really what I'm after. And the beauty of this fabric is it frays really good, which is perfect for these shabby kind of flowers that I'm trying to do. Kind of take my nails and tear it along the edges. And we're going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to dry it with my heat tool, and then when it's dry, I'm going to go back over it with Mocha Mama again. Here it is, all dry, and I'm going to take the Mocha Mama and I'm going to go over this in different places, add a little more color in where it had faded out a little bit before. And that's pretty much it. So now I have the bottom layer, and I have the top layer that when I put it all together, I will scrunch this up a little bit so you can see the difference in the layers. The back layer you don't see as much, but the top layer is the fun layer, and that's the one I've saved for last. We're going to start with the same procedure we did before, and we're going to take Mocha Mama and we're going to ink all the way around all the edges. Get it on there nice and thick. Okay? And this one, I'm going to get really wet because I'm going to do more manipulating of the paper on this. So I want to make sure it's nice and ready for me to work with. So I'm going to kind of rub it in the water, and I'm going to really just start working around the circle, scrunching it up and bending some in. And the more you work with it, the more the water works its way into the paper, and the more pliable you're going to find that your paper is to work with without tearing. Now this circle I want smaller so that we can see our other layers, and I want it to have a little more texture and a few more folds. So what I did with this flower is I start on one part and I start to fold it in. And then I do some more folds, and I keep going all the way around until I get the folds in it that I want. And it looks kind of like this. And to help kind of hold it in place, because I don't want to lose these folds when I take my heat tool to it, or I don't want them to come out even if I let them dry on their own. So I'm going to flip it over, and this little part where I've pulled it together back here, I am going to take a clothespin and I am going to clip it right there. This gives me something to hold on to, and it also gives me something to work around. So I kind of can play with it a little more and get the flower shape that I'm really going for. And once I'm happy with that shape, I'm going to go ahead and dry this as well. So give me a minute and I will be back once this is dry. But here's what your flower looks like, and I'm going to take the Biscotti and I'm going to get up on some of these pieces that are sticking up, and again that just adds a little extra kind of worn look to it, older look. Okay, now we're going to start putting the layers together. To make this layer easier to work with, I'm going to flip it over and take my scissors, and I'm just going to cut off that part that I was holding on to because we are not going to need it there, and it's going to take some of the bulk away. So just cut that right off. So let's start with our bottom layer. we're going to put some glue in the middle of our first flower, and I'm pretty generous with the glue because it's going to allow me to work with the next layer. And that's the fabric, and by doing that, I've got it kind of this mushy glue in the middle that allows me to pinch the fabric and pull it in, and gives me the border around the flower that I'm working on. And once I'm happy with how that looks, I'm going to go ahead with the next layer. I'm going to add some more glue. Any glue that you have will absolutely work on this. And that's where I'm going to add this on top. And as you can see now, I've got 3 distinct layers. They're still kind of messy, and that's good. And we're going to give that just a minute to dry in there. I'm going to take a craft knife, and I'm just going to take it and turn it and poke a hole right through the center of my layers so that I have a spot to put my silk flower. The silk flower was one I had laying around, and I wanted to add some brown to it a little bit, just give it a little more interest and color. So I just took and rubbed it in the Biscotti ink, and that is what I came up with. And then all I am going to do is flip it over and pull these petals down so I can get to the stem. I leave the stem on because it gives me something to work on, and it helps hold it in the flower. When you're all done, and I'm going to put the glue, right around the base of the flower, and then I'm going to stick that where I created the hole with the craft knife, and it just slides right on in there, and it comes out the other side with all those layers. So I could leave this just the way it is, but I'm not very good at leaving things alone. When I added the leaves around it, I felt like the layers were too light and I wanted a little more color to them. So that is when I grabbed my lemonade and my mango Mai Tai, and I just sprayed my craft mat with some water so I had a spot to get my paintbrush wet. I know normal people use cups and bowls. I just sprayed on the mat. And I took that and added it to the yellow, and then I brushed that on there. It gave it more of a watercolor effect, which is what I was going for, and just lightly got it in there in between some of the layers, and it brings out the yellow and the fall colors. And I'm going to kind of wipe it off before I go in and use it with the orange, and then I'm going to go over the top of the yellow, or around the yellow, with some orange. And because I can't leave well enough alone, I got out the Inca Gold Metallic Rub, and this stuff is so fun to play with. I took it and I just lightly spread it on, and it adds just a touch of gold to different areas. I'm sure other people use paintbrushes. I use my fingers for everything. And I just put it right there in the flower, but it just adds a little shimmer and a little shine and a little extra. And then that flower is all ready to add to the bow on top of the lantern.